Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I will hook up my Tellstick to my Magic Mirror, and I will be using REST APIs to communicate with Telldus live. Hope you enjoy. My Tellstick is connected to Telldus Live, and when I log into my account I can see all my devices. I can add new devices, I can control them and see the status of them. Some of them are Zeta wave devices and some are older 433 megahertz devices. I can also see my sensors, and I can decide which of the sensors I want to show or which ones I would like to ignore, because it's automatically detecting all the sensors in the nearby. I will not go into any details here about Telldus Live. You can find that out on their homepage if you're interested. So the next thing I will do is that I will move to the development site, api.telldus.com, and this is where we will need to get our API keys first of all. You can follow this link here to generate your token and your API keys, so we can access Telldus Live from the Magic Mirror using REST APIs. You can also find some documentation here on how to log in and how to use different methods for getting status updates or controlling devices. And there are also some examples. But what I want to show you now is the API Explorer. It's a simple tool, but it's quite useful when you start developing and want to see what's happening and test different calls. So what I will be using is first of all the device list, and I will also be using device information and device commands. And I will use the sensors, and you have the same here. You have a list of the sensors and you have sensor information. So if you check the sensors first, we can change the setting to return JSON, because that's the format I want the data to be returned in. And if I just try to send it here, I can see that I get back a list of my sensors. And if we grab the ID of one of the sensors here and go to sensor info and paste the ID here and select JSON and send. And then we can see the result, and this is the details of that sensor. And I can see, for example, the temperature and other values here that are available in the API call. So it's a quite simple structure to retrieve a list of devices or sensors, or to retrieve the details of the device and sensors. You can do the same with devices. If I go to device list and send, and then I get a bit longer list with all my devices back. And I can do the same thing here. Get the device ID, go to the device info in this case, paste in the ID, execute, and you can see that I get the details of this sensor, device, sorry. And in the same way, you can also control the devices. So this is the first step. The next step is to implement this in the Raspberry and the Magic Mirror and start doing some coding. I have opened up my demo Python program for the Magic Mirror, and we will add the code that we need for contacting the Telldus Live REST APIs. First of all, I want to bring in some libraries. I used requests library and the OAuth library for OAuth authentication. Simple libraries to use for any kind of access, and it will certainly do the job here. So first I load them. Then we have our API keys. You would have received this from your API, telldus.com. You need a public key, a private key, you need a token and token secret. And of course you also need the URL that we will be using to retrieve the information in JSON. And you have a client ID that you need to supply. I will poll the Telldus Live APIs every 30 seconds. So this is what this is for. We'll use that later on. I want to set up a class. In this case, I'm only using the class for collecting my variables together. I like to do that since it's easier to keep track of what global variables you have and easier to keep track of your data. So in this case, I'm just adding the variables I'm going to use for the Telldus data. And I have some timers as well. I will show you later what that is for. That is to see and make sure that the background thread is running correctly. I've added thread, initiating the thread here that we will be used. I will put the Telldus REST API calls in a background thread, so it's automatically checked every 30 seconds. The next thing is that we actually go further down here, and we will uncomment the actual functions that we will use for the Telldus connections. So let's do that. And then I will just go down to my main. So before I start the web server, as you may remember, this will lock up the main, so it will get stuck in when I start this Flask web server. So I have to do all of the other things before. First, I will just call a simple function to authenticate with Telldus Live, and then I will call the main Telldus Live thread. So let's have a look at those two functions now. First of all, we have the authentication. Here I'm using the OAuth authentication method, and it's quite simple, as you see. It's very straightforward. You supply your keys and your token and your token secrets, and then you're authenticated. So it's very simple to use this library and to supply the information for the function. So after authentication, we will start the actual thread, and that's what we have here. First, I just will note down the time and date when this thread was initiated. And later on, I will use this to determine if the thread has stopped working or something has happened. And I will actually give an alarm on my magic mirror if for some reason one of the threads gets stuck. Then we have the actual calls to get the values. And I've made it very simple here. I will just call 3 different times here. I will retrieve the indoor temperature, the indoor humidity, and I will also retrieve the status of one of my devices. In this case, it's the pool pump. I'm going to see if it's running or if it's not running. At the bottom of this function, I will reinitialize my thread with a polling interval of 30 seconds. That means that when I run this one time, it's automatically reinitializing itself, and 30 seconds later, I will come into this function again. And using the time here, I can then determine if something has happened and see that it has stopped or something. So let's dig a bit deeper. Let's go to the sensor retrieval. The first thing we do here is that I use a try except functionality of Python. And this is to not get any error messages if something temporarily fails. Could be that I have a connection error, a network error or something. And then it will just print this, and it will exit the function, and it will continue to run. And whenever Telldus Live is available again or the network is available again, it will automatically continue. The first thing I do is that I use the sensors list. I retrieve the sensors list, and I will put this into a JSON variable. So the response sensors will contain the JSON response that I get from Telldus Live. And you can see that I have told Python to format the data into JSON here at the end. When I have done that, I will parse the return data. It could be a lot of sensors. It could be several hundred sensors or something that you get your data from. And the way that I built it up is for ease of use. So if we go back up here and see the call, you can see that I'm actually calling in clear text. This is the name of the sensor, and this is the value I want to retrieve. And this is actually, you could retrieve different parameters from the temperature or humidity sensors. And in this case, I want the actual value, meaning the temperature. So this is just so it's easier for me to add new things here and add new sensors or devices. So I want to call them in clear text. Obviously, there is a drawback with this. Would I ever change the name in my Telldus Live? I need to change it here as well. Otherwise, it will not find the sensor or the device. But that's the way I've done it. So going back down here, we're parsing the JSON list of sensors that we received and finding the sensor that is actually the one I want to read. And then we grab the ID of that sensor. I have also an extra check here to make sure that we actually get any data, because sometimes I can get some bad data back or an error message or something, and I don't want my thread to terminate for that. So I'm checking that there are actually data in this array that is formatted in the way that I expected. So when I have the ID of the sensor, I will do a next call and that is to get the details. And in this case, it's the sensor info, and as a URL parameter, the ID of the sensor that I want to get the data from. And again, I return it in JSON, and I will pass the data down here, and I will return, in this case, the value of the sensor for temperature. And that's returned from that function. It's quite easy. You could probably do it more efficiently if you want. In my case here, I'm actually calling and retrieving the full list of sensors every time I go into this, but it's a quick call and I haven't seen any big problems. You could retrieve the list of sensors one time and save it and then reuse it. I actually did that in the beginning, but then it got more robust when I retrieved the list all the time because of different errors that could happen. So that's why I did that. And then actually the get device works in the similar way. So if we look here, we do the call for list of devices, and then we parse this for retrieving the device by name. And then we also grab the details of the device and return the value to a previous function. So it's a similar call. Even if not used, I've included one more function here, and I will use that in later videos. And that is the set device function, structured in the same way. But with this function, you can actually set the status of the devices, turning off and on different things. And I will use this to, for example, turn on and off the pool pump in a later video. But I included it here. It works in a similar way. In this case, it actually parses the previous device list that we retrieved using the name and then retrieving the ID of the device. And then the second call, the second part here is for sending the command to the device. And here it can be a bit different depending on your devices and what methods they support. All of that you can find out on the API Explorer on the Telldus Live page. So what methods to use and what's possible to do with each of the different devices. In this case, I'm just turning on and off a device. And then I will also return the status of everything, if it went okay or not. So these are the calls. It will be run every 30 seconds to retrieve more data. You can change the interval if you want. But of course, it's not recommended to run it too often because of the load and so on. And I'm sure there are some restrictions as well on the Telldus API site. Now we have the data. We have put the data into the class that I created. And now we want to send it back to the Magic Mirror. So let's go back up here and look at our very, very small web server. And so far, if you remember this from previous videos, this is the main page of the Magic Mirror. And this is where we return the JSON data to our main HTML page. So what I will do is just uncomment the lines here. And I will be returning the indoor temperatures, humidities, the pool pump, and this one I will actually comment out because we haven't initiated that one yet. Let's see if we can get this to work. First, I want to open up the HTML page and make sure that we are actually showing some data here. I have set some positions of where I want this to be printed on the page. So I use the styles here. And then we want to have this part. And here you can see that I'm just printing the indoor temperature from the data set that I will get back from the Flask web server. It's kind of a simple setup, but let's see if it works. Go back to the Python, and then I execute it from my directly from Visual Code. And hopefully it will get running here. Refresh, yes, it's running. And there we are. Actually, already I'm refreshed. So the temperature is coming back from Telldus Live. It's printed where I decided to print it on the page. It worked. Just want to show you a few more things that can be useful before I close this video. One thing that is good is to create another page on your web server for debugging, since you may not always want to return all your variables to the main HTML page, and you will certainly not show all the values. But it could still be good to see them and know what you have and if you want to use any of them. So what I will do is just create a new page. I will call it index. Like this. And in this one, I will always be able to return all of the information I want and use it for debugging. So let's make it JSON data we return. This should do it. Let's see if it works. It's running. And here is the main page, which with the two values I'm showing. And then I have another page here. And I just added /index for this one. And here you can put whatever data you want. And you can put it in a raw format so you know what fields to get that you get back from your different devices, and you can maybe use them on the Magic Mirror in the future. Then I also want to show you how we can control devices using the set device function that I added. And I will just make a small test here. I will use set device to turn the pool pump off. In this case, 2 means off and 1 means on for this device. So we will just do this simple example. And I also want to add something to show it on the main page. Just created a small table here, which will show 2 different symbols depending on if it's on or if it's off. And there's also some styles supporting this. So let's uncomment that. Like this. And then let's see if it works. Start it. And on the main page, I've just added this symbol and it's not spinning. I will show you what I mean. Let's go back to the code and change it to 1. Just restart the code. There we are, and on the main page, we now have a spinning wheel here that shows that the device is on. Simple example, but actually you can use the code for any of your devices and turn it on and off. And you can also use dimmers if you want to do that. Then you need some other values here. I think there's a different method for that, but that you can find on the Telldus homepage. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.